Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're tuning in, chances are you're looking for those really high leverage things you can do, actions you can take right now for a long, healthy, functional life.
That's the goal.
And today, we are digging into a blueprint for exactly that. Aging well, built, really, entirely on muscle.
Yeah, that's right. We're going deep. We're looking at this comprehensive discussion between Dr. Mike Israetel, the founder of RP Strength, amazing data-driven protocols, and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She's a leading voice on skeletal muscle and health.
Okay.
And our mission here from the source material is pretty clear, distills their findings into a real actionable guide, like a hypertrophy formula, especially if you're hitting your 40s or, beyond.
And let's be clear, this isn't about vanity, right? We're talking function.
Yeah.
Survival, almost.
Absolutely.
So we'll unpack four main things. First, why muscle is basically the organ of longevity. Dr. Israetel even says life or death.
It's that critical.
Second, those key moments in aging, the inflection points, where things really start to change if you haven't prepared, 40s, 60s, 70s.
Yeah, the timelines matter.
Third, a really detailed, step-by-step training plan for someone's starting from scratch. A total beginner.
Super practical.
And finally, the science behind protein. Why getting enough is just non-negotiable.
Cannot skip that part.
We've got a ton of actionable stuff here.
Okay.
Let's get into it. All right, let's start with that core idea, this powerful premise from both experts. Skeletal muscle isn't just tissue. It's the organ of longevity. What exactly makes muscle mass so critical, especially as we age?
Well, it's fascinating because it boils down to two really distinct roles the muscle plays, and these aren't about aesthetics at all. Both start to decline pretty drastically with sarcopenia or, age-related muscle loss.
Okay, two roles. What's the first one?
The first is just mechanical, basic function. We call it ambulatory and physical function. If you have low muscle mass, you have low strength. Simple as that. And that makes basic stuff, activities of daily living, ADLs, really hard.
We usually think strength means lifting heavy weights in the gym, but you're talking about just existing.
Exactly. Think about spare strength. When you're, say, 25, maybe getting out of a chair uses only 10% of your max leg strength. Easy.
Sure.
But fast forward, you're 80. You've lost maybe half your muscle mass. Now, that same simple action, getting out of the chair, might take 90% of your available strength.
Wow.
And if your muscle mass drops low enough, getting off the couch or frankly off the toilet, that becomes the defining limit of your independence. It's stark.
Okay, that makes total sense for just moving around, physical stability. But the second role, that's where it ties into internal health, right? The metabolic side.
Yeah, the second function is purely metabolic, and this is like the real linchpin for longevity. Skeletal muscle acts as this massive glucose disposal sink.
A glucose sink, like a sponge.
Exactly like a sponge. Imagine your muscles soaking up blood sugar after you eat. The bigger the sponge, the more muscle mass you have, the better your body handles glucose, the better your overall metabolic health. This is absolutely critical for regulating blood sugar, insulin sensitivity. It directly impacts your risk for things like type 2 diabetes later in life, more muscle, better metabolic control, period.
This really highlights that key distinction Dr. Israetel made. For decades, health advice was all about cardio, right?
Yeah.
Then it shifted a bit towards strength training. But you're saying the real benefit, especially metabolically, depends on hypertrophy actually gaining muscle size, not just getting stronger, like neurologically better at lifting. Why isn't just getting stronger enough? Why does the physical size matter so much for metabolism?
That's a great question. It gets to the why behind the size. See, when you get stronger just through your nervous system getting better brain-muscle connection, better technique, you are stronger. But the muscle cell itself might not have grown much.
Right, you're just using what you have more efficiently.
Precisely. But for metabolic health, we need that physical structure, more muscle tissue. Hypertrophy means, one, you literally have more muscle fibers, more volume to soak up glucose. Two, you get increased cell surface area, which means better insulin sensitivity. Your cells respond better. And three, you often get more mitochondria, the cell's powerhouses, and better capillary networks, better blood flow to the muscle.
So more machinery to process fuel.
Exactly. More machinery, better plumbing. If you just get stronger by using less muscle more efficiently, you haven't actually expanded that glucose sink. The metabolic upside is, well, pretty minimal. Maybe none, honestly. You have to build the physical engine bigger to get those robust long-term health benefits.
So the goal for health isn't necessarily hitting a huge one-rep max deadlift. It's building enough overall muscle volume so your body can handle the metabolic demands of life day in, day out, for decades.
That's it, exactly. Shift the focus from the temporary performance number, which is strength, to the long-term biological insurance policy, which is muscle size. That's why Dr. Lyon's work is so focused on muscle as this organ that needs feeding and growing.
Okay, that difference between strength for function and hypertrophy for, well, everything is huge. But there's this cultural pushback, isn't there? Why is actively trying to build muscle, hypertrophy, often seen as, I don't know, vain or extreme? Especially when you're trying to sell it as a health necessity.
Yeah, that's a real hurdle. The source material suggests the term strength training kind of took hold precisely because it sounded less ego-driven, less about looks than hypertrophy or, God forbid, bodybuilding.
Right.
It was a way to make lifting weights seem more palatable. Especially, for groups that were hesitant, like women historically. The initial push was very practical. Get women lifting for bone density, anti-osteoporosis.
So it's about not breaking a hip.
Pretty much. Preventing those osteopenic fractures, like snapping a femur, just getting off the couch, that was the selling point.
And then there's that classic fear, right? The pink dumbbell problem. I don't want to lift weights because I might accidentally turn into Ronnie Coleman.
Oh, it's hilarious, but so pervasive. The experts point out, look, building significant muscle is hard, like incredibly hard. You need tons of calories, obsessive training, perfect recovery. Nobody accidentally gets too big. It takes serious dedication. But that fear, it's genuinely holding people back from improving their long-term health.
But is there a risk? If we focus only on hypertrophy, do we alienate people who just want to be fit? Isn't demanding muscle growth maybe too much for some?
That's a fair point, but the argument from the experts is that the conversation needs to evolve. They use this Linda anecdote, right? Talking to older women who say, oh, I don't want to get bulky.
Yeah.
The response is basically, okay, I hear you. That's maybe the same concern you had when you were 17 about your appearance. But let's talk about the real issues now.
The stakes are higher?
Exactly. The real concern isn't looking too big. The real concern is falling and not being able to get up or getting that prediabetes diagnosis. Once people grasp that muscle mass is critical for controlling their metabolism and staying independent, the aesthetic worries tend to fade. Or sometimes they even become a motivator, seeing muscle as protective armor.
So, if you're serious about aging well, gracefully, you have to prioritize building muscle. Hypertrophy. So when does the clock really start ticking against people who aren't doing this?
The experts highlighted two major inflection points, times when people who haven't been building that muscle savings account really start to feel it. The first big one hits in the 40s.
The 40s, okay.
This is when that feeling of just assuming your body works, the one that gets you through your 20s and 30s, even if you treat it badly.
Yeah, the bounce back decade.
Right. That starts to, fragment. In your 20s, you can live on Twinkies and booze, and your blood work's probably fine. You feel invincible. But in your 40s, that resilience starts to evaporate. Recovery takes longer. That spare tire shows up. Even if your weight hasn't changed much, you notice little dips in capability.
You start seeing the difference between your calendar age and your biological age.
Exactly. But like you said, people in their 40s often rationalize it. Busy careers, family, maybe less focused on looks. When does that stop working? When does the real crisis hit? That happens at the second, much rougher inflection point, usually in the 60s and 70s. This is where the game changes completely. Aesthetics. Most people stop caring much about that. The focus shifts to pure survival, and it shows up in two main ways: the functional crisis and the metabolic crisis.
Okay, paint a picture of the functional crisis. What does that look like day to day?
The functional crisis is when those basic ADLs become genuinely difficult or impossible. It's the 70-year-old who loves cycling but suddenly can't make it up a small hill, has to get off and walk the bike for miles. It's struggling to open a jar, or needing help lifting your carry-on into the overhead bin on a plane because your shoulder strength and stability just aren't there anymore.
Wow.
That cumulative muscle loss over decades means you just don't have the strength buffer to handle everyday gravity and resistance.
And the metabolic crisis, that's the doctor's office visit.
That's the doctor giving you the bad news. The nasty blood work, as Israetel puts it. Pre-diabetic. Lipids are out of whack. Blood pressure's high. It happens because your body's engine, that glucose disposal sink, has shrunk so much it just can't manage the nutrients you're taking in effectively anymore.
So failing to build muscle in your 40s and 50s leads directly to this internal system failure later on.
Directly. It's a ticking clock.
Okay, hammer home the urgency again. Waiting until that diagnosis, or until you can't climb stairs easily. It's too late, isn't it?
It's playing catch up from way behind, waiting until the crisis hits. It's like trying to put out a massive fire with a squirt gun. You're starting the race when the gun went off a long time ago. Ideally, lifting weights, resistance training, it should be a lifelong habit. Start as a teen if you can, but if not, the 40s and 50s are your absolute last best chance to get serious. Build that muscle reserve aggressively. It's your investment in an independent, functional future.
All right, we've established the why. Let's get practical. If I'm listening now, how do I figure out if I have adequate muscularity? Without needing a fancy DEXA scan.
Good question. Since clinical tests aren't practical for everyday checks, the experts give us a few operational ways to assess. The first, and maybe the easiest, is just the visual test.
The mirror test.
Yep. Look at yourself naked in the mirror. Can you actually see the shapes of your major muscle groups? Like the clear curve of your deltoids, shoulders, the shape of your traps, the sweep of your quads on your thigh. If you can distinguish those shapes, you probably have a decent amount of muscle. If your outline is more like, well, the source used the phrase, a crappy Dr. Seuss drawing, just sort of a general human shape without clear muscle definition. That's a potential warning sign. It could indicate sarcopenia setting in.
Okay, beyond just looking, what about those subtle signs in daily life? Those functional tells?
There are those ADL struggles we mentioned. Finding it surprisingly hard to carry 2 heavy bags of groceries from the car. Needing to pause for breath halfway up a couple flights of stairs, feeling generally unsteady or easily knocked off balance.
Right.
For a lot of people, especially women maybe, not being able to confidently lift a standard carry-on suitcase into the overhead bin, that's a really common indicator of insufficient upper body muscle and stability.
Okay, and then there's the big one, the self-test anyone can do at home. The experts really emphasize this, the 10-rep floor test. Walk us through how it works and what it tells you.
Okay, this one is simple, effective, and honestly pretty revealing. You lie flat on the floor, face up or face down, doesn't matter. The goal is to stand all the way up, completely upright, without using anything external for help. No walls, no chairs, no pushing off your knees with your hands. Just stand up. Then control yourself back down to the lying position and repeat.
And the standard is?
The standard for passing is doing 10 repetitions in a row. Without getting so wiped out, you feel like you're going to vomit or pass out.
10 times. Wow. Why is that single test so informative?
Because it requires everything. Total body muscularity, coordination, balance. You need explosive strength from your legs and hips to initiate the stand. You need core stability throughout the transition. You need controlled eccentric strength to lower yourself back down safely.
It's like a mini workout just doing the test.
It absolutely is. It's a compound movement that perfectly mimics a fundamental life function, getting up from the ground. If you can knock out 10 reps, your muscular reserve is probably pretty solid for most daily tasks. If you can't do 10, that points to a significant functional deficit. Usually it's a combo of not enough muscle, too much body fat, or both.
Now, what about someone listening who has, say, really bad knees or chronic hip pain? Doing that test might seem impossible or even risky for them. Does the test still apply, or could it discourage them?
That's a really important point. The test is primarily an indicator of functional capacity, not necessarily something everyone must perform at all costs, especially with pre-existing diagnosed joint issues.
Okay.
If severe instability prevents that specific movement, you obviously don't force it, but the principle remains critical. If your body is so frail that the basic pattern of floor to standing is inaccessible, even with modifications, that's still a major red flag.
So the goal isn't the test itself, but what it represents.
Exactly. If you can't do the test, your training needs to focus on strengthening the components, the leg strength, the core stability, until you can safely approximate that fundamental movement pattern, because life will eventually ask you to get up off the floor.
The source material had that striking example, right?
Yeah.
The politicians struggling just to stand up from kneeling.
Yeah, the anecdote about Nancy Pelosi needing significant assistance, using both hands just to rise from a kneeling position, it was used as a visual for hitting that danger zone. If kneeling requires that much effort, imagine falling flat.
Which brings us to the absolute worst case scenario, the ultimate fitness failure. The I've fallen and I can't get up moment.
Precisely. The Lifeline commercial scenario, that's the functional crisis hitting its peak. Falling and being unable to get yourself back up, unassisted. If that happens, or if you fear it could happen, that's your signal. Your absolute priority, starting immediately, needs to be building muscle mass, strength, and stability. Full stop.
Okay, so let's say someone listening just failed that 10-rep test, or they recognize those visual or functional red flags. They're motivated. Where do they start? What's the actual plan? Say, For a 45-year-old runner with low muscle, that dad-bod endurance type, or someone completely new to exercise, is the starting point the same?
The expert consensus is, yeah, pretty much. The initial blueprint for almost all beginners is fundamentally the same. It has to be built around compound exercises, anti-gravity movements, ideally with free weights. And the absolute first priority is establishing good movement patterns and technique.
Okay, let's break it down. Tip 1, movement priority. What specific exercises are we talking about?
We're looking for exercises where you move your body or a weight through a significant range against gravity. Think fundamental human movements. 1. Lower body pushing and hinging. So variations of squats, lunges, and maybe stiff leg deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts, RDLs.
Okay.
2. Upper body pushing, like overhead presses and bench presses or dumbbell versions. 3. Upper body pulling, things like bent over rows, dumbbell rows, maybe even upright rows.
And why these specific types of moves? Why free weights?
Several reasons. 1, they're efficient. They hit multiple large muscle groups at once. 2, they're functional. They mimic how you push, pull, squat, and hinge in real life. 3, they demand balance and core engagement, especially free weights like barbells and dumbbells. And that free weight point is key early on. If you master free weights, learning to control that instability, you'll automatically be good at machines later. But it doesn't really work the other way around. Start with the harder, more functional skill.
What about safety, though? For a true beginner, maybe someone in their 50s, isn't throwing them into a barbell deadlift kind of risky. Shouldn't they start on machines to be safe?
That's a valid concern, and nuance is needed. The goal might be a free weight barbell deadlift eventually, but a true beginner, especially older, should likely start with variations that are easier to learn and have less spinal load.
Like what?
Things like the trap bar deadlift, if available, or Romanian deadlifts, RDLs with dumbbells, even goblet squats. The key is picking the safest compound movement that lets them train that essential hinge or squat pattern robustly.
So prioritize the pattern. Find the safest tool to start.
Exactly. Safety first, always. But don't avoid challenging functional movements entirely just because they seem risky. Learn them correctly, start light.
Okay, let's talk about how to do these moves. Technique, range of motion, reps, that's tip 2. What are the rules here?
Rule 1, prioritize a full range of motion.
Right.
ROM, don't cheat yourself with half reps. If you only squat to 90 degrees, you're only getting strong in that top half. Real life often forces you into deeper ranges. Unexpectedly, picking up something heavy off the floor requires a deep squat or hinge. Training the full ROM builds strength and resilience through that entire range, minimizing injury risk when life throws you a curveball.
Makes sense. And repetitions, what's the magic number?
The sweet spot, the gold standard for beginners aiming for hypertrophy and strength, is sets of 5 to 10 repetitions.
Why that specific range? Not higher, not lower.
Below 5 reps, the weight is very heavy, which is great for pure strength, but you don't get enough practice reps for your nervous system to really learn and groove the technique of these complex movements.
Okay.
Above 10, maybe 15 reps, the weights get lighter and fatigue becomes the main challenge. Beginners often break down technically when they get tired, increasing injury risk. Plus, sets of 5-10 require using weights that are heavy enough to really stimulate muscle growth and provide a strong signal for building bone density.
The bone density point. Explain that a bit more, especially its importance for older women.
Yeah, this is crucial. Lifting relatively heavy weights, like those used in the 5-10 rep range, creates significant mechanical tension and compression through your bones and joints. That stress is the primary signal telling your body to lay down new, stronger bone tissue. This is vital for combating osteopenia and osteoporosis, conditions particularly common in postmenopausal women. Lighter weights, like those you'd use for 15-plus reps, just don't provide that same powerful bone-building stimulus. So 5-10 reps hits both muscle and bone effectively.
Got it. Technique is king, you said. How does a beginner become a technique stickler? What should they focus on?
Obsess over the eccentric phase. That's the lowering part of the lift. Lowering the bar to your chest in a bench press, sitting down into the squat, lowering the dumbbells on an RDL.
I just rolled the descent.
Absolutely. Never just drop or relax into the bottom of the movement. Control it. Keep the muscles active. This controlled negative does 2 things. 1, it's where a lot of the muscle damage that triggers growth happens. And 2, it dramatically reduces the risk of injury compared to just dive bombing a lift. Beginners should train slow and controlled, not fast and sloppy.
Okay, movement selection, ROM, reps, technique. Now, how often, how much? Tip 3, volume and consistency. The advice was to start. Surprisingly light.
Yeah, shockingly minimal at first. The absolute biggest mistake beginners make is doing way too much in their first workout, getting debilitatingly sore, that deep DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and then quitting because it felt awful.
Right. Avoid the I can't walk for 3 days scenario.
Exactly. So for someone totally untrained, consider starting with literally one set of each chosen exercise. Take that set close to failure, maybe stopping 1-2 reps shy while maintaining perfect form. The goal of week 1 is just learning the movements and surviving without crippling soreness.
One set, okay. And frequency. How many days a week?
Start with 2 whole body training days per week. Give yourself recovery days in between. Think like Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday.
And stick with that. For how long?
Stick with 2 times a week for several months, honestly, maybe the first 3 to 6 months. The priority early on isn't smashing yourself with volume. It's consistency. Showing up twice a week, every week. Mastering the technique. Gradually adding weight or reps. That consistency is infinitely more important than trying to do too much too soon.
Could you sketch out a sample 2-day beginner routine, just so people have a concrete example?
Sure. Let's make it simple. Workout A and workout B hitting different patterns. Workout A, e.g. Monday. Maybe focus on squatting and vertical pushing pulling. 1. Goblet squat or leg press. Start with 1 set, work up to 2-3 sets of 8 reps. 2. Overhead press, dumbbells or machine. 1-3 sets of 8 reps. 3. Lat pull down or assisted pull up. 1-3 sets of 8-10 reps. 4. Maybe some simple core work like planks. 2-3 sets.
Okay, that's workout A.
Workout B, e.g. Thursday. Focus on hinging and horizontal pushing pulling. 1. Dumbbell RDLs or trap bar deadlift. 1-3 sets of 8 reps. 2. Dumbbell bench press or push-ups, on knees if needed. 1-3 sets of 8 reps. 3. Seated cable row or dumbbell row. 1-3 sets of 8-10 reps. 4. Perhaps lunges or step-ups. 1-3 sets of 10 reps per leg.
So still very low volume per session initially, maybe 6 to 8 total working sets once they build up from 1 set.
Exactly. Minimum effective dose. Enough to stimulate adaptation, not so much it prevents recovery and consistency.
Now the crucial part, progressive overload. How does a beginner actually progress in those first few months? How often should they try to lift more or do more reps?
This is the engine of hypertrophy. You must continually ask your muscles to do slightly more than they did before. For the beginner, the progression hierarchy is simple. 1. Technique first. Don't add weight or reps if your form breaks down. Master the movement.
Okay.
2. Add reps. Once technique is solid at a given weight for, say, 8 reps, aim for 9 next time, then 10. Once you can hit the top of your target rep range, for example, 10 reps, for all your sets with good form.
Then add weight.
3. Add weight. Then you increase the weight, usually by the smallest jump possible, maybe 5 pounds on a squat or deadlift, maybe just 2.5 pounds on an overhead press. Then you work on getting your reps back up with the new, heavier weight.
And how often should they expect to make these little progressions?
In the very beginning, those first few months, you should expect to progress pretty regularly, maybe adding a rep or adding that small amount of weight every week or every couple of weeks on most lifts. That initial progress is rapid, the newbie gains, but it slows down. The key is tracking it meticulously. Write it down. Logbook, app, whatever. You need objective proof that you're consistently challenging yourself. That's the only way to know you're providing the stimulus for growth.
Okay, let's shift gears. What about the person who's past the beginner stage? Maybe they've been hitting the gym 2-3 times a week for a year or more. Their form is decent, but now progress is stalled. They're noticing that tire around the belly creeping in even with the training. How do they keep driving hypertrophy?
Right, the intermediate plateau. This is where things need to get a bit more strategic. The 2 big levers to pull now are typically relative effort and potentially frequency or volume.
Relative effort.
Yeah.
Meaning how hard you push each set.
Exactly. As a beginner, you grow even if you don't push super close to failure. But as you get more trained, especially as you get older, that changes. You can't just go through the motions. You have to embrace the suck a little. You need to grit your teeth, as Israetel says. Push those sets closer to actual technical failure, the point where your form would break down on the next rep. That often means pushing through discomfort when your brain is screaming stop.
So less leaving reps in the tank.
Generally, yes. You need to consistently challenge the muscle fibers that only get recruited when things get tight.
And if they're already training hard twice a week installed, what about frequency?
That's the next logical step. If 2 days isn't cutting it anymore, try 3 full body sessions. If that eventually stalls, maybe move to a 4-day split routine like an upper-lower split done twice a week.
Why does increasing frequency help?
It allows you to get in more total weekly training volume, more stimulating sets without making each individual workout excessively long or fatiguing. Spreading the workout often improves recovery and allows for better quality sets compared to trying to cram everything into just 2 marathon sessions. Frequency and volume become key tools for the intermediate.
Okay, makes sense. Now, underpinning all of this,
Yeah.
the gym work is just the stimulus. We need the building blocks. Let's talk nutrition,
Yeah.
specifically protein. Dr. Lyon's work is huge here. What's the absolute core principle?
The core principle is simple but non-negotiable. Get enough total protein and spread it out. You need sufficient daily protein intake distributed across at least 3, ideally 4, high-protein meals or snacks throughout the day.
Why spread it out?
Because if you're training hard, your body is constantly cycling between muscle protein breakdown, from the training and just living, and muscle protein synthesis, rebuilding and growing. To win that battle, to actually build muscle, you need a steady supply of amino acids available. You need to keep tipping the balance towards synthesis consistently throughout the day.
Okay, let's quantify it. What's the actual protein target people should shoot for?
The go-to, easy-to-remember recommendation that covers most bases is 1 gram of protein per pound of your body weight per day. So if you weigh 150 pounds, aim for 150 grams of protein.
1 gram per pound. That seems higher than the standard RDA.
It is higher than the minimum needed to just prevent deficiency in sedentary people. But we're not talking minimums here. We're talking optimizing for muscle growth and repair in active individuals. The experts agree this 1 gigapound target provides a robust buffer and supports hypertrophy much better.
And is that target different for older adults? You mentioned anabolic resistance earlier.
Great point. Yes, as we age, typically over 50 or 60, our muscles become somewhat less sensitive to the growth signal from protein. This is anabolic resistance. It means you might need a slightly larger dose of protein in a single meal to trigger the same amount of muscle protein synthesis as a younger person.
So the total daily amount might be the same, but how you get it matters more.
The total daily amount might even need to be higher for some dedicated older lifters. While 1 gigapound is a great starting point for everyone, if an older individual is training hard and consistently hitting 1 gigapound but still struggling to see results, experimenting with going up to maybe 1.2 or even 1.5 grams per pound could be beneficial. Though hitting 1.5 grams persistently is a serious dietary commitment.
And this ties into protein timing, right?
Sure.
You can't just have one massive protein shake at the end of the day. You mentioned hitting a threshold per meal. Tell us about the leucine trigger.
Yes, this is key, especially with anabolic resistance. Leucine is one of the essential amino acids, and it acts like the specific key that turns on the muscle-building machinery in your cells, the mTOR pathway.
Okay.
To reliably click that switch, especially in older muscles, research suggests you need to consume roughly 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine in a single meal. And to get that much leucine typically requires eating about 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein in that meal.
30 to 40 grams. So if your meal only has, say, 15 or 20 grams of protein,
you might not be maximizing the muscle-building response from that meal. You might not hit the trigger hard enough, especially if you're older. It's like turning the key, but not quite starting the engine.
how does the average person translate that 30, 40 gram target into actual food?
Yeah.
The RP guys use that fist size rule, right?
Yeah, it's a useful visual proxy. Aim for roughly a fist-sized portion of lean protein at each main meal. That typically gets you in the ballpark. Think about 4 to 6 ounces of cooked chicken breast, lean beef, fish, or maybe 1.5 cups of Greek yogurt or cottage cheese, or 5 to 6 whole eggs.
Got it.
The biggest issue that experts see isn't which protein source people choose. Most lean animal sources or good plant combos work fine. The issue is simply not eating enough protein overall and not getting enough per meal.
Right.
Too many meals are carb and fat dominant with just a sprinkle of protein. You really have to consciously build your meals around that protein source to hit that 30-40 gram trigger consistently multiple times a day. Get the quantity right, first major in the majors, then worry about the finer details.
Okay. We've covered building the muscle foundation with hypertrophy training and protein. What about more dynamic stuff? We know power, the ability to move quickly, declines sharply with age. Should people, especially beginners or older adults, be adding things like sprints or box jumps right away?
That's a common question. Power does decline, but the experts emphasize why. The number one reason is loss of muscle mass. Number two is loss of strength. Power is largely downstream from size and strength.
So fixing the power problem means fixing the muscle and strength problem first.
Primarily, yes. And while power training has its place, starting with plyometrics, jumps, or sprints carries significant risks for untrained or older individuals. Think pulled hamstrings, Achilles tendon injuries. The risk of getting hurt is quite high.
How do the experts frame that risk-reward calculation?
They use a great analogy, the cake analogy. Hypertrophy, building muscle size, is your flour and sugar. Strength training, learning to use that muscle effectively, is baking the cake. Power training, like plyos and sprints, that's the icing on the cake. You need a substantial, well-baked cake before you start worrying about fancy icing. Trying to add explosive icing to a tiny, crumbly cupcake just makes a mess and doesn't achieve much.
Makes sense.
Historically, even in athletics, athletes often weren't pushed into serious power work until they hit certain strength benchmarks, like being able to squat roughly twice their body weight. A standard very few older adults or even general population folks will reach.
So for most people just focused on health and longevity.
The potential marginal benefit from adding high-risk plyometrics probably doesn't outweigh the very real risk of an injury that could derail their essential strength and hypertrophy training for weeks or months. Build the cake first. Get strong and muscular. The power improvements will largely follow.
Okay, shifting back to the weight room. Intensity. The discussion strongly advised against 1RM testing, finding your 1 rep max, for older folks.
Okay.
So how should someone, especially that intermediate lifter, gauge how hard they're actually working each set?
Right. 1RM testing is just too risky for minimal reward in this context. The focus should be on relative effort. How close are you pushing to your limit on that day within the target rep range? This is often tracked using concepts like RPE, rate of perceived exertion, or RIR, reps in reserve.
RPE and RIR. Can you explain those simply?
Sure. RPE is usually on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is maximum possible effort. For hypertrophy, you're often aiming for an RPE of 7 to 9 on your working sets. RIR is maybe more intuitive. It's simply asking yourself, how many more good reps could I have done with perfect form before failing? For hypertrophy, you typically want to leave only 1 to 3 reps in reserve, 1 to 3 RIR.
So if I finish a set of 8 reps and feel like I could have definitely done 2 more good ones, that's 2 RIR, or maybe an RPE of 8.
Exactly. That's the target zone. You should feel challenged. The last few reps should noticeably slow down. You might be breathing heavily, maybe making a bit of a lifting face. If you finish the set and feel like you could have done 5 or 6 more reps easily, you probably didn't push hard enough for optimal growth, especially as an intermediate.
But judging our peri can be subjective, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting out.
It can be, which is why the most practical solution, the objective anchor, is still the logbook and consistent progression.
Back to tracking.
Always back to tracking. If your log says you did 150 pounds for 8 reps last week with good form, maybe at 2 RIR, this week your goal must be to try for 155 for 8, or maybe 150 for 9 reps. That relentless pursuit of adding a little weight or another rep forces you into that high relative effort zone, whether you nail the subjective RPE score perfectly or not. The objective progress is the best measure of sufficient intensity over time.
Last potential pitfall.
Right.
The interference effect. What about cardio? If someone is lifting for hypertrophy but still loves their running, or cycling, maybe that marathon runner turned lifter, do they need to worry about cardio hurting their muscle gains?
This comes up a lot. The interference effect, where excessive amounts or poorly timed aerobic exercise can potentially blunt some of the signaling for muscle growth, it is real scientifically.
But how much does it matter for the average person?
For most people, very little. The effect is typically small unless you're operating at the extremes, like training for an elite marathon and trying to maximize muscle gain simultaneously. For the average person focused on general health, function, and building some muscle, the benefits of doing both strength training and cardio far, far outweigh any tiny potential interference.
So don't skip your run just because you lifted weights this morning.
Absolutely not. If you're short on time, doing them back-to-back or even combined in the same session is vastly better than skipping one entirely. Health comes from both.
Is there an ideal way to schedule them, if time allows?
If you have the flexibility, separating them by several hours is generally considered optimal. Maybe lift weights in the morning and do your cardio in the evening, or vice versa. This gives the muscle protein synthesis pathways, stimulated by lifting, a clearer window to operate without potential competing signals from endurance exercise.
So lift first, prioritize that, then fit cardio in later, if possible.
That's a good general strategy if maximizing hypertrophy is the primary goal alongside maintaining cardio fitness. Prioritize the lift. Give it its recovery space if you can, then get your aerobic work in. #outro.
Okay, this has been incredibly detailed. A really powerful blueprint for using muscle growth as the foundation for longevity, drawing directly from the expertise of Dr. Mike Israetel and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. Let's try to boil down the absolute must-remember takeaways for everyone listening.
Right. Takeaway number one, muscle is not optional. It's your primary organ for staying functional and metabolically healthy as you age. Your focus must shift from just strength or exercise to hypertrophy, deliberately building more physical muscle size. That's your glucose disposal sink.
Got it. Second, the training formula is pretty clear. Use compound, anti-gravity, free weight, or challenging machine exercises. Train them in the 5 to 10 repetition range. Start with low volume, nail the technique, control the eccentric, and then relentlessly pursue progressive overload. Track everything. Consistency beats everything else.
Third, fuel the machine. Protein is non-negotiable, especially with age-related anabolic resistance. Aim for 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight daily as a solid target. And crucially, spread it out. Get at least 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein per meal multiple times a day to consistently hit that leucine trigger and maximize muscle building.
And fourth, remember the cake analogy. Build the foundational muscle size and strength first. Don't chase risky, high-skill power training like plyometrics too early. Get strong, get muscular. That's the priority for lifelong function for most people.
Absolutely. The ultimate key here isn't some magic pill or complicated protocol. It's showing up. It's consistency. It's caring enough about your future self, your ability to move, to live independently, to stay healthy, that you commit to the progressive challenge of resistance training. Your body can build muscle at almost any age. The biological machinery is there.
You just have to give it the right stimulus and the right building blocks.
Exactly. So the time to start building that essential biological insurance policy wasn't yesterday. It's not tomorrow after your next doctor's visit. It's right now.